What's up, folks? Like I've mentioned earlier, I am very excited to be back in the podcasting game. I was on the Muddy Waters podcast last night with Chuck Ellis, doing a podcast episode of my own now again. Absolutely fantastic to have Roman Cassidi with us. I went to high school with him. He's a college Republican at UMaine right now. Great fighter for the right side of the aisle. Great fighter for truth, and is excited and ready to go whenever we need him to make sure that Republicans win in the next election cycle. But I could talk for hours. I'll let him introduce himself.
As Sam said, my name's Roman. I've been involved in GOP politics for a number of years now. Sam was actually one of the big players that got me involved. It's been a blast. We've had some good memories together, doing door knocking, doing events and stuff. So, first I want to, thank you for having me on the show today. It's very kind of you. It's good the two of us being able to talk because we've always had good discussion about politics and just life in general and stuff. So it's always good to be back here with Sam. So yeah,
definitely. So okay, you mentioned any big Republican name here in the state, you're either going to get a ton of support or you're going to get serious backlash from a minority, but a loud minority. You go to UMaine, and you're a college Republican there, you're active, so you were probably semi-involved in Laurel Libby coming there. Even if you weren't involved with that, how did that go? I've heard different reports, and I've seen different videos where there was quite literally a mob yelling and screaming over her being there on campus. How'd that go?
Yeah, so I was partially involved. It was technically we put it under the Turning Point banner because she came under the Leadership Institute, and since they're a nonprofit, they're not supposed to technically work with college Republicans. Sure. So like the college Republicans, we kind of both clubs basically intermingle. We're like sister clubs.
It was technically a Turning Point event.
Yeah, like college Republicans are running it, but we put their banner on it because a lot of our Turning Point e-board in the club, is either on or mingles with the College Republican e-board, which I'm on. I'm the student involvement director, so like I reach out to kids, help them get involved in like activism, help them get involved. So I was involved as an e-board member in planning that. As for the event itself, it actually went really well. We had a lot of protesters sign up with like really fake, like garbage names. You could tell, like we had a sign-up sheet on our campus groups, which is like the website or app we use to like do club events. And so we were able to filter out most of them. And the 3 or 4 that actually signed up with their real names were actually really good. One of them was talking, making a ruckus. They kicked her out. But the other 3 or 4 that were in there stayed pretty quiet until the end. And then they did like a Q&A with her. And then they marched out, cussing her out and stuff. But for the most part, they were pretty quiet during the actual speech she gave. And then, like you said, there was also that giant mob, probably about 100 to 150 people outside. But luckily, we kept them outside. We had a lot of security. The campus police chief and the Orono police lieutenant are both conservative from what we know. So they're like, if anyone bothers you, let us know. So that was good. So.
Now, do you guys have any estimates on how many people showed up in the massive mob out there? I saw from your chairman in the video you sent me. Both you guys sent me some videos. It looked pretty big, and it kind of gave the same feel that when Olivia Krolchak came. It gave a similar feel to that. Was it similar numbers or?
So I wasn't there for Olivia's event. I wasn't in college yet. They said that was about 300. This one was probably about 100 to 150, I'd say.
Still
so not quite as big. But yeah, still pretty good size. When we had some like people who aren't used to it, like my mother came to support me. She's not really used to that kind of stuff, so she was kind of rattled. She's like, "Oh, this is actually what you guys like go through and do on college campus." I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is like not a daily thing for me, but
an average Tuesday."
An average Tuesday for me, And like I said, I've been in the game for since 2021, 2022, so I'm kind of used to it by now. But for her, and we had other like students and stuff who were conservative, but not super involved. They were kind of like, "Oh, geez, what is this?" They never really seen something like that. So that was cool. It was neat for them to like be able to see stuff like that. But it was good. The crowd, they were big, they were obnoxious, but no one was hurt. We kept them at bay. So all in all, it was pretty good.
Cool.
Yep.
Now, in terms of efforts from the college Republicans, are you guys seeing more momentum? I mean, you and I have talked about this a little bit, off podcast. Back when I was involved with the CRs, it would have been a few years ago.
Hmm.
Cody Porter was active with them. It was really strong. Then last election cycle, it dwindled. But
Yeah.
from what I can collect, it's starting to build back up. Even may not have the same numbers as before, but the people that are there are ready and raring to go. Am I correct in saying that?
Oh yeah, definitely. So from what I heard, kind of after Cody and there was a couple other guys that were involved with him left, it would have been what, spring of 2023, I want to say.
It was right around there.
Yeah, right around that time. So I would have been what, finishing up my sophomore year of high school, I think.
Yeah.
Apparently, like, the club like didn't quite die out, but it sort of did. And then our current chair came back. He was a freshman last year, and he actually, by coincidence or by chance, got roomed with a guy who was a sophomore. He's our vice chair now, and the two of them happened to strike up conversation one night, and they both found out they were into politics and stuff. So they were sort of like, I don't think the club had died out yet, because I think the university gives you like a 4 or 5 year grace period where if you're inactive, they'll still like renew your club status, if that makes
Sure.
sense. So, but they sort of got it going again, and I think they had one other guy. I think his name was Nathaniel, um, and they sort of worked with a couple other students, but it was kind of dead. But this year, I happened to find it on our campus groups. I'm like, I want to get involved. I've obviously been involved with Republicans and whatnot, and the GOP and Turning Point, for a while. And then so I showed up to the first meeting, and there was actually a bunch of other students. And our current chair was kind of surprised. He's like, wow. He's like, we had like no one last year, and now we've got a good 10, 15 people. We've got 8 people on our e-board, and we've got a good 7 to 10 people that are members who show up pretty loyally, every time we have a meeting. So yeah, definitely rebuilt, and everyone's very active and ready to go. And we don't have a lot of hesitation when we're like, hey, we're gonna have an event. No one's like, oh, everyone's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Let's do this. Let's get the hats, let's get the flags, let's do this. So that's encouraging to see. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I think for some people who would be listening and they might hear 7 to 10, that doesn't sound like much. If you think about it, take 7 to 10 people in Lewiston or Bangor. Think about how many doors they can knock.
Yeah.
So think about it that way.
Yeah.
There is a lot of people that can be reached with just 7 to 10 people. But if you only have 2 or 3 or 3 or 4, that cuts the amount of people you can reach in half.
Oh, absolutely.
And you said somewhere, I think, around 10 to 15 maximum. That doesn't sound like much, but the amount that amount of people can do is quite impressive. The National College Republicans usually help with a deployment for door knocking every election cycle, at least the last 2 I've been involved with. And I remember back in 22, the College Republican organization, it was, quite frankly, massive. And you guys are well on the way to doing that again. So very encouraging. Very encouraging.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, Peyton, is he the chair of the UMaine College Republicans or at the state level?
Yep. So he's the chair for the UMaine chapter, and then on the state level, he's the national committeeman. So he's the one that would reach out on behalf of like the whole state of Maine, all of our College Republicans chapters, and he's involved with the other 49 national committeemen.
Cool.
So yeah. So if that makes sense, like he's sort of the representative for all of the Maine chapters on a national level.
Yep.
So yeah, he keeps in touch with like people who are higher up in the College Republicans and make sure Maine's connected with the other 49, or it may not be quite 49 that have them, but like the other 47 states or whatever that are involed with our College Republicans. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
We ought to have him on sometime. Heck, we ought to do all 3 of us. That would be really cool.
Definitely. Yeah. I think I don't know. Have you officially met him yet?
It's funny, in today's day and age of social media, you can text back and forth with someone and know them, but not know them in person.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never seen the man's face in person, but I've texted back and forth with him a ton. So he seems like a great guy and fired up.
Oh, definitely. I think you guys would get along really well. So he's a good dude, and he's definitely been doing a good job at keeping people active and keeping the club alive, staying keeping it afloat. Him and Anthony, the vice chair, have done a good job with that and getting us involved. So that's good.
Very cool. So what that tells me is there is a good foundation of young conservatives that are fed up with the garbage happening in our state and want to change it. That's because part of the reason I mentioned that, I'm going down to Virginia at the end of the month. I will still be a registered Maine voter, but I'm going to be going to college for a couple of years. So I will be able to be active in terms of social media, but I'm not going to be able to hit the doors and things like that like I usually can. So, still love Maine, still going to be fighting for a Republican victory, but I'm not going to be able to be, getting photos of candidates and hitting the ground running. So, to know there's other people doing that, it's encouraging. I mean, you and I both, we graduated from Bangor Christian. Look, they've got their Turning Point chapter now. That's
Yeah.
another whole group that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at it, about every 3 years, for a good chunk of time, there was one conservative student that rose out of Bangor Christian. It was Cody, it was me, then it was you. Literally, about 3 years difference in each one of us. Now they've got a Turning Point chapter. I don't know why you or me didn't start that. That falls on us. We should have. But better late than never. And it's great to see. I mean, I hope you saw the post on Instagram.
Yeah.
Room. I remember sitting in those desks being miserable during math class, and now I see the same room full of young conservative students saying, "Hey, we got to change what's going on."
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Very happy about
That was encouraging to see. And I think Aiden, Cole, and what's the other one? As Addie Tucker have been a very good, the chair and vice chair over there. They've been really good at being active. And I know when I was at the Republican National Convention, both of them actually texted me. They're like, "Hey, we're involved with politics." Like I had a lot of people like, "Oh, that's cool, you get to go there," but they were the only two that were like, "Hey, we actually want to get involved in politics and like, we're actually into this stuff." So that was encouraging to see. So I think those two, they're like right behind me, grade wise. So I think that's good that they're, they stepped up and they're continuing passing the torch, if you will.
Yep. I definitely see there's potential in both of them, but there's something about Aiden too, specifically him. I see a lot of potential. You can analyze people in a group. You could have a lot of like-minded folks. You could be pro-life, pro-God, want the government off your back, pro-Second Amendment. You could have all the right views. But sometimes people aren't really going to step up, even if they say they do. They can sign a volunteer sheet, but they're not going to do anything, which is sad, but it happens.
Yeah.
Aiden specifically, I see potential in him. I did a Leadership Institute training, about 2 years ago now. And they referred to folks like you, me, I mentioned Cody, Peyton, all of us, as the 3 a.m. types, where they tell you to go to Arizona at 3 a.m. because it's a political thing. All right, we'll do it.
Yep, exactly.
I see Aiden becoming that, and
Definitely.
It's very encouraging. So
I'd be curious to see like where he ends up after high school, because if he ends up doing college, especially if he's at UMaine, it'd be good to get him, involved super early, or even like if he ended up over at like Husson, we're trying to look for people to start a chapter over there. So we'll see where he ends up.
Does Husson not have a chapter?
So they had one for a while. The guy that runs the Bangor GOP was the guy that founded it. He was going to college there, I don't know, probably a decade ago or so. He's an accounting major, and a dude by the name of Mike Capici. And then after he graduated, I guess it sort of died off. So, yeah.
Well, that should be neither one of us go to that school, but it would be interesting to see if we could do some recruiting to see, can we get one started? Because that's the other big college in the area. It would be great to have a foundation there.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that EMCC, Nathan Page, I don't know if you know him at all. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I recognize the name.
Yeah, he's kind of known around the Bangor Christian community. But him and some of his friends are starting a Turning Point chapter at EMCC. So even if they didn't have a College Republicans, if we could at least get conservative clubs at all the big campuses in the Bangor area, we could all, sort of co-op together and have big events, especially when the Bangor and Penobscot GOP come to town. We'd have a lot more students showing up to potentially, like I said earlier, pass the torch on to. So, so we'll see how that goes and everything.
Which I definitely think that's I could be wrong, but it's something that usually we struggle with when a generation moves on and there's another generation coming in. Passing the torch, it sometimes dies out quicker than we'd like to. So to see that there's something at EMCC, that's great to hear. Especially with recent events, who knows? I probably shouldn't say this being active in Republican campaigns, but I almost think the Turning Point name might be more effective right now. It's not that we can't build up Republican chapters, but having both, I think, will bolster both movements.
Oh, so definitely, yeah.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So, okay, you and I are both active in Maine politics. I know you can't endorse a candidate, but have the College Republicans started to look at seeing what they can do in the future for, different candidates to get them elected? I know there's obviously recruitment on the campus side of things, bringing speakers in, but actually launching campaign efforts. Have there been any discussions of that?
hmm So I know that Maine Civic Action, I want to say,
Yep.
he's reached out to us about door knocking
Good.
opportunities. We were at one of the Penobscot GOP meetings. I want to say the October one. It was in Corinna at the town hall there,
Yep.
and they had talked to us about door knocking. So they've been kind of going around the state. So they haven't quite reached us yet in the Orono area, but
Yep.
they said when they get there. And as for like governor candidates, I know we've discussed. There's actually a fraternity at UMaine. I forget which one that has a couple of like their leaders, like some of the frat brothers that are actually conservative, and they want to help us in Turning Point host a governor forum at the Collins
Cool.
Center in somewhere around March or April, I want to say. So that way we get a chance to have all of the candidates there, and then whoever wins the primary, we obviously can go on to endorse. But it
Yep.
gives people at UMaine and all our chapters a chance to see all the candidates in play.
Sure.
So yeah,
That'll be really cool. I
yeah.
think those forums, especially depending on where they are, have done a great job bolstering recognition for the gubernatorial race.
hmm
Um, as folks know, I'm backing Bobby Charles, and to be able to see him along with all the other candidates, I was at the Civic Center about a month and a half ago. I think it was in September, October. It was great to be able to see every candidate discuss stuff, but especially see the candidate I'm backing do a really good job amongst all the other candidates.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I knew he was great to begin with, but then to see his performance on stage too was even more encouraging.
hmm
So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm also, LePage's race. I'm encouraged by that too. Um, Usually people skip over the Moosehead Lake, Piscataquis County area. There's a reason that Piscataquis County Republicans have their Facebook page called the Red County Republicans. It's a Republican county. It's
Oh
almost a
yeah,
guarantee
definitely.
you're going to win it.
Yeah.
I mean, the example I always use is back when Obama ran for president, we were the only county that voted fully Republican during that election cycle.
Mm.
So a lot of candidates, Republican candidates, skip over this county
hmm
because they think, all right, we've got it in the bag. It
Yeah.
was absolutely terrific to see LePage stop here. He stopped in Dover, spoke at Pat's Pizza for a while. Almost the entire dining room, or the section of the dining room he was in, was full. It was fantastic. He got to talk to people. People got to ask questions. People got to take photos. For a campaign event, you can't ask for a better turnout and a better
hmm
response. Then he got a chance to go over. I think he went to Representative White's gun shop. I think he might have gone to Herring Brothers. He made the rounds in this area, which I hate to say it, but a lot of Republican candidates might make a stop here once and then never come back because they assume they've got it in the bag. So,
Yeah. So
what's
that's
the college
encouraging.
Republican standpoint on LePage right now?
I think we're backing him since like when a candidate doesn't have a primary and there's
Yeah,
just one candidate, we're allowed to, as far as I know, back that candidate. So
sure.
we're gonna, I'm imagining, gonna be doing door knocking, stuff for him. Since there's not like a primary for the CD2 race, I don't know if we're gonna do a forum or something, but we may
Yep.
try to get him on campus at some point. I don't know exactly. I'd still be, it'd still be in the works. But as far as I know, since he's the only, one for the GOP, we're backing him and doing everything we can to, door knock and get him elected.
Yep.
Yeah.
It'll be definitely very interesting to see how that race goes.
hmm
I've said this before. I'll say it again. I want to know your thoughts on this. With Representative Golden dropping out of the race, there's almost a clear path to victory. And now that's risky because people think, oh, he's got it in the bag and they don't show up to the ballot box. But assuming everyone votes, it's a pretty solid path to victory.
hmm
But an idea I've had, and I would love to see them battle it out. If we could get another well-known candidate and a trusted candidate to run for Congress and have them have a brutal primary, because I'd support LePage, or say Billy Bob Fockingham has hinted at running for higher office. I don't want him to run for governor. I'd love to see him run for Congress.
hmm
I would have loved Representative Laura Libby to run for Congress.
Definitely. Yeah.
She said she wouldn't run for higher office, but to have a two-way primary between Fockingham and LePage, or Libby and LePage and see them battle it out. I could be wrong, but I feel like that would generate a lot of media attention and boost a lot more attention on social media to the race. And no matter which candidate, say it was of those three, I'd support either any of them. Whoever won,
Hmm.
I'd support him. But I doubt that'll happen.
Hmm. I get the point in media, but the only thing that would worry me is like if they try to outspend each other in campaigning, make
Mm.
sure you don't bleed your coffers dry for when you go to actually campaign against who is it even running? It's what's his face? Is it Matt Dunlap? I think the guy running on the Democrat
It
side.
might. I know Jordan Wood is one of them.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah,
yeah, right.
yeah,
Okay, I shouldn't put it that way. We need to fight to win, but
yeah, yeah,
does he really have a shot in CD2?
yeah.
I
Um,
don't think he does.
No, I think the thing that's helping us is number one, CD2 has historically been more red leaning. I think we were at one point a +9 district. We may not be quite, it might be like +7 now. But historically, you've got Aroostook County, you got Piscataquis County, Northern Penobscot, you
Yeah,
know, Bangor, I would say is purpley kind of depending on where you are in Bangor,
yeah,
but still, we've had candidates be able to win. Obviously Poliquin was in that seat, a number of years ago.
sure.
And even Golden wasn't like super far left. Like you can't have a far left leaning
No.
liberal in there because the district won't have it.
And Jordan Wood
So
is exactly that.
yeah, he's that. And him and Dunlap don't have a lot of name recognition. The thing that helps LePage, he was governor for 8 years. He was
Exactly.
very effective. He's got that name recognition. Plus he ran, 3 years ago for governor.
Yeah.
Again, so the name recognition and also being, well experienced, I think is going to help him out come this November.
And a lot of the base have a general respect for him. I mean,
Yeah.
no one was there when he came to Pat's Pizza, no one was there to get gotcha questions. I do think there was a couple trackers there from the other side of the aisle. When I left, I saw a couple cars that had Harris stickers on them, and I'm like, okay, might have been a couple trackers at the event, but that's normal.
Yeah.
But 99% of the people that commented, I think all of them actually were happy. There's a pretty clear path to victory, but he did hit the biggest point of if we have a clear path to victory, that actually takes people voting. And some people don't like to be told that. But without going out and casting your ballot, someone like LePage will lose any shot of success that he has. And we need him in Congress.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
So, no, I'm very excited to see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a little bit further away from the college Republican side of things, but still somewhat connected. You graduate, what do you want to do in politics?
What do I want to do in politics?
Yes, sir.
So I think eventually it would be cool to, hold an office position. I don't know how high up I would get, but I know in my district, my House district, I believe is District 34. It's Kentuskeg, Levant, and Glenburn, and I think that'd be a cool seat to have. Right now we have a woman in there. Her name is Abigail Griffin. She's a retired teacher. She's a born again Christian from Glenburn. I have personally never met her, but I've researched her on like the House page and whatnot. She's very, pro America, very conservative. Like I said, Christian.
Yep.
But she's up there in years. I want to say mid 70s. So, and
Yep.
eventually she's probably going to term out. I think the Gurin family has tossed around, running in this area still, but even them, they're getting up there in age as well. So I
Yep.
think it would be cool at some point once I've graduated and kind of have a job in place where, I can take time off to do something like that, to potentially run in my House district here, like the Glenburn, Levant area, and then potentially maybe go higher from there, but we'll see. But that would be kind of a starting point, I would say.
I definitely think there's a lot of potential once you and myself and a few others get past the college side of things. We're going to see a whole generation of young conservatives running. You can see folks like myself. It would not surprise me within the next 10 years if I was in Representative White's seat or Senator Guerin's seat.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm backing Representative Chad Perkins for state senate. He needs to be our next state senator from this area. So Stacey Guerin's area. There's a couple other folks in the race, but for me, I'm backing Representative Perkins. And I know you can't endorse a candidate, but that's what I'm doing. A point being, within these seats, it would not surprise me if you had myself, you, take someone like Christina Parker, the comms director at the Maine Republican Party. She's done a great job. The social media accounts at the state party hadn't been used since 2019 until they took her on. Oh, okay, I take that back. the Instagram account specifically. They were doing a good job on X and Twitter, but guess what? There's more than X and Twitter. They've got that going again. They've got a podcast going. She's good at what she does, and she's been good at what she does since her days Turning Point. So the three of us and a few others, that would not surprise me if there's a whole army of young conservatives in Augusta within the next 5 to 10 years, maybe even less.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you consider federal office?
Yeah, I potentially. I thought about governor, but I think it would be cool to have the CD2 seat, someday, because I could live in my hometown, here in the Glenburn Bangor area. I love Maine. That way, you could say, hey, I had a chance to be a federal, congressperson, bring some stability to Washington, but you can also still, also stay in your home. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, you know what I mean? So that was something I tossed around. I know Peyton's also talked about that too. And I definitely, if he ever ran for that seat, I definitely, as a chief of staff or a campaign manager or something, we talked about that. So obviously that's probably a ways down the road, but his ideas we floated. So, I think that would be cool.
15 years down the road, having Peyton, myself, and you in a heated primary for that seat. Anyone, all three of us would be great, but that would be fun. That would be fun.
Yeah, definitely. So, but I'd even be happy, like, even if I didn't win a primary, if I could be a campaign manager or even a chief of staff in Washington, helping whoever does win, getting behind them and helping them push for change in Washington and Augusta, that would also be super cool because you need people like that too. So.
Now, would you ever consider going into the media side of things? And part of the reason I asked that, I mean, you've been involved in podcasting before. You and I never did a ton of podcasting, but we both dipped our toes in the past. I'm getting back into it.
Yeah.
Last night with Chuck Ellis on the Muddy Waters podcast, I don't know if we were talking about it either while recording or just after, but what are the chances of folks like us, Chuck, me, you, Christina with the Wicked Smart podcast, what are the chances we become the mainstream media in 5 to 10 years? I mean, our grandparents are the only people watching WABI. No shade to WABI, but the Portland Press Herald, sometimes WABI, and Bangor Daily are just media arms of the Democrat Party.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're below the age of 60, there's a good chance you're not consuming any of that media.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think there's potential for that. I know, I forget, I believe the guy, was it Steve, the guy that runs the Maine Wire, does a good job.
Yes,
yeah, he does a good job with that. And I've seen Christina, she does a fantastic job. I definitely think there's potential for that too. And I myself wouldn't be opposed to that if I never ran for office. As I told you, my friend Molly and I, she's the Turning Point president at UMaine. We're starting a podcast. We just launched our first episode last night. It's just the two of us kind of introducing ourselves. But we're trying to get that off the ground. And I think, if I didn't run for office, I think the podcast and media side of things would also be super fun. And it's a good way to push things too. Because, like in office, you might term out, but when you're media, you can be there to the day you die pushing. Exactly. You know what I mean? So that'd also be fun, I think.
It's crucial too that this is something Chuck and I did talk about. The social media game for the Republican side of the aisle it's sucked for years, quite frankly. We have really good operations when it comes to door knocking, and no shade to door knocking. Heck, I've done it for a long time. You've done it with me. It's very crucial. Those face-to-face conversations, it can help you guide the way you present your message. It can get really good chances to have conversations with voters, and just a good chance to get some exercise, quite frankly. It's awesome. But that won campaigns in 1990. It's 2025.
Yeah.
In 2022, when I worked for the party, I talked about this with Chuck too. We were required to have Twitter. X now, but Twitter at the time. Why weren't we required to have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok? We should have.
Yeah.
But we didn't.
Yeah.
So we had a really good operation on X, or Twitter at the time. It was really functional. It worked really well. It got us experienced in some forms of social media. But even Facebook and Instagram, forget about TikTok and YouTube. A lot of the base for the Republican side of the aisle in terms of here in Maine is on Facebook. Take that post from X, post it on Facebook, and post it on Instagram. Does it cost us 10 minutes of door knocking? Yes, but we can reach probably at least a few hundred, if not a few thousand people with the entire field team posting about them knocking doors.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think, I mean, well, Christina, is younger and she's done a really good job with that. But yeah, especially with like our younger conservatives coming in, like, yeah, why haven't we been, utilizing, X is a good thing. I don't use it a lot, but yeah, Instagram especially. Like, I think Instagram would be a huge thing. I mean, we're seeing like candidates like LePage and Bobby Charles and other people.
Mm.
Robert Wessels, for example, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram because that's what the youth are watching. And the youth are going to be the next generation of conservatives. So I definitely think we need to, get a hold of that and start posting a lot on those platforms.
And I think you need people outside of the campaigns directly. I know I've been active with Bobby's campaign, but the social media I'm doing is, yes, in support of him and other Republican candidates like LePage, but it's not directly with the campaign, not directly with the party. It feels both personal and like a different source of media. It gives a sensation of view of more outside support and publicity. I don't know. I really do think there is a chance within the next 5 to 10 years that WABI, the Press Herald, and Bangor Daily still exist. But the Muddy Waters podcast, the one you are doing, what I'm doing, what Christina's doing, that'll be the mainstream media here in the state of Maine.
Mm-hmm.
The Maine Wire is going to be surrounded by a bunch of other media outlets, kind of like you've got Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN. They're all big outlets, but there's a whole bunch of them. Here in the state of Maine, we're going to have a bunch of Maine versions of that in the podcasting and social media form. Mark my word.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we even saw that in the 2024 election. Like, a lot of people were turning away from like specifically Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN, and they were turning to things like the Joe Rogan Experience.
Exactly.
We saw Theo Vaughn. I know Kamala
Yep.
Harris didn't do as many. I think was it her or Hillary that did Howard Stern, maybe, which is a little different.
Actually, don't know.
It might have been. I know Hillary did. Kamala might have as well. But yeah, more podcast or radio type things as opposed to your typical news. And I know Trump did a really good job, especially with was it Logan Paul as well, analyzing that. So I think we're going to start seeing, especially with younger people, a more turn to podcast and not necessarily radio, but podcast type things for their source of media, especially with candidates.
No one listens to the radio anymore. It's very similar content, but there's a couple things. You're not limited by ads. You're not limited by a time frame. You're not limited by what station you can be on. You control it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are risks because people can turn you off a lot easier.
Yeah.
But the more people that get active, eventually there's going to be certain podcasts that make it and certain podcasts that don't. But in today's day and age of artificial intelligence, I hate AI, but I won't lie, I've fallen victim to some of it. I use a program called Opus Clip. It is very handy. I'm going to use it later on this podcast episode. Not everybody has an hour or 30 minutes or an hour and a half, depending on how long the podcast is, to listen to it. I can take this episode and within about 10 to 15 minutes maximum, usually a little bit less, have about 30 clips that are ready to use and fit for social media. It's given me a chance to go back and find my old podcasts and reuse them. Recently, almost my entire social media feed on TikTok and a good chunk of Facebook and other platforms has been clips of an interview I did with Governor LePage just after the 2022 election. You can tell I look like a 2-year-old, but it's been a great chance to reuse that episode where I really had no use for it other than in long form content.
Mm-hmm.
I think we will be the media within 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people are turning to independent because we know that Gen Z has that. I've heard that Gen Z has a very entrepreneurial mindset, or a lot of Gen Z people are kind of like, I don't really do what my grandparents or my parents did, where they like worked for a company for 50 years. That's good and stuff. But some people are like, I want to make my own company, my own business, my own product. And a lot of people have talent with technology and with camera and microphones and whatnot to make their own media outlets. And so I think, yeah, definitely. And especially with changing demographics, we're going to see a lot of people on both sides stepping up and saying, all right, we're going to do candidates on our podcasts as opposed to our cable TV news or something,
And the right, if that's one thing about the social media efforts we've been really good with, we are miles ahead of the left in some areas. It's amazing how quickly we did catch up. We should have been active on social media 15 years ago. We should have been the head of the game. We were stuck in 1990. That's on us. But as our generation has gotten active, and as the Trump campaign primarily learned, okay, there's been this narrative that China controls TikTok. Whether they do or not, they use TikTok to their advantage, and it was very successful. And you can tell they're still using that strategy with official White House accounts. Their social media game is better than a lot of professionals marketing their brands.
Mm-hmm.
I won't lie. The Trump campaign really pushed our social media efforts forward, but we've got a whole army of young folks our age jumping into the podcast game. Joe Rogan, say he retires in 15 years, there's going to be so many other podcasts out there. It'll be a big loss, but there's so many others to take the place. It may not be as big as his, but there's going to be no shortage of media. Not that he's a hardcore Republican, but a lot of us listen to him. I do. I listen to almost every single episode.
Yeah.
In terms of the TikTok game, in terms of the podcast game, we are miles ahead of the left. They might have some guys like Dean Withers who do TikTok lives, but when Gavin Newsom's sitting there with his legs crossed, we all know it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen, trying to do a podcast, and Charlie Kirk absolutely destroys him on his first episode. And then they depend on Michelle Obama, of all people. She was good in short episodes on The Ellen Show, but on a podcast, she's a laughingstock, with all due respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're definitely true about that. And I feel like all the big name podcasters featured Trump, and I don't remember really ever seeing a lot of, other than I think Theo Vaughn had Bernie Sanders, but other than that, we never really saw Kamala. Like we had no Kamala, Joe Rogan, no Theo Vaughn, no Jake and Logan Paul. I'm trying to think of other big name people. Charlie utilized podcasts and stuff. So definitely, I think. If you look back at the Obama campaign, obviously I was like a year old, but I think that's what hurt McCain a lot. Is Obama had this new thing called Facebook at the time. He utilized that a lot. McCain was older; his generation was older. They didn't utilize it as much, and I think for a long time the Democrats that was kind of their launching point, and they were really good at the social media game. But now, especially after COVID, and with how messed up, I guess is the word I'll use, the past president's administration was. I think a lot of conservatives are like, okay, we need to push for change and we need to jump on this whole social media thing, and especially with podcasts. And luckily we have taken leaps and bounds to catch up and even push ahead on certain things in the media. So that's encouraging to see.
Agreed. And I think some folks will say, well, you go after Gavin Newsom and you go after Michelle Obama, but you're just a 20-year-old doing a podcast. It feels cheesy. Well, okay. I don't have access to millions of dollars. And I'm also not a middle-aged individual who's got a lot of life experience. And I'm also not a professional politician. So let me ask you this. If we're actually discussing things with substance, it's a halfway decent podcast, and we're producing it if it continues this way, at a decent rate, why are we almost at a better level than someone like Gavin Newsom and Michelle Obama? 20-year-old college kids. So they're going to criticize us, but as far as I'm concerned, Gavin Newsom and Michelle Obama should have a much bigger following and a much higher quality production, considering their status financially, politically, and in terms of where they are in life. So I think that says a lot more about them than it does us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They should be miles ahead of us, but their podcasts are falling apart. I think people like private media too. There might be, say, The Bridge with Sam Bridges takes off, and in the future I acquire a few other podcasts. Or you take off, and heck, you acquire mine. Who knows? It could go that way. We could have a main media side of things. Who knows? Merge with the main wire. They take over us. I don't know. Maybe it could happen. But there's been a lot of analysis with, say, the Daily Wire. After Brett Cooper was no longer with them, the comment section fell apart. The stuff that they're putting out with that YouTube channel isn't bad, but it's nowhere near as popular as it was. People don't trust the company. They trust the anchor.
Mm-hmm.
Why did Fox News get so hurt after Tucker was gone? I have my problems with Tucker now. I think he's nowhere near as effective as he used to be. But people no longer trust the company. They trust the source. I don't think the day and age of major media companies, even in the social media game, hence the Daily Wire, is nearly as effective as it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're starting. Well, it's hard because you kind of have splits within certain movements. You know, you've got younger people kind of trying to replace the older people, and some of it comes in the form of like conspiracy or just, I don't know, like some of these new folks, you know, like we'll take like, you know, Tucker's sort of gone on this side of things, but you take like Nick Fuentes, for example, and Candace Owens, you know, they're younger and they're energetic, but a lot of their stuff I think is more fueled on, you know, like views and conspiracy, and, you know, like kind of like Trump sort of took advantage of this a little bit, and some Republicans have, like saying the key buzzwords that I can to get me relevant and get me stuff. However, I think their movement, you know, this new, it's sort of like it's America First, but it's kind of branched off from Trump's version. This new sort of odd version has almost hurt us and is almost going too far in our right direction, if you will, and stuff. So, you know, some people, like you're saying, the Daily Wire aren't quite as effective. Some young people are being more effective, you know, like Charlie and like other, you know, podcasters like Theo Vaughn, for example. But then some people are just like destroying, you know, movements or like ripping things apart by, yeah, they're young and they might be sort of effective, but they're effective in a negative manner, if you will. So, you know, like I said, I mentioned Fuentes. He kind of worries me. I don't like that, you know, and I didn't like that. Yeah, I didn't like Carlson, you know, necessarily cozying up to him, but that's another separate issue for another day, you know. So
I think,
I don't know.
you know, some people hold, you mentioned that interview. President Trump was asked about it, and he essentially said free speech, he can interview whoever he wants. I can understand that wasn't President Trump supporting Fuentes, but it was, why does it matter? He might be a bad guy, but he can interview whoever he wants. By a technicality, he's not wrong. But Tucker has such a massive platform, even without being on Fox. Why would you platform someone like that?
Yeah.
You know, there are other folks that hold Fuentes' views, but nobody knows who they are. Sadly, Fuentes has gained more of a bigger spot in the public eye than I'd like to admit. And someone said he's right wing. No, he's not right wing. He's in his own separate group. If he's right wing, I don't want to be.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because he can say 50% of his beginning statement I can agree with, and then he says something racist, and I'm like, dude, what? Where did that come?
Yeah.
He can say something that's genuinely conservative, and then brings up something racist, and I'm like, dude, what? How are you a borderline Nazi supporter? How are you that racist? But then the other 50% of what you said was sane. It doesn't make any sense. We need to run away from him as much as possible. And I think with Charlie's assassination, that opened up a gap into see who's going to be the next big conservative leader. And kind of scares me the fact that he's gained so much, I don't want to say popularity, but recognition since Charlie's assassination. If someone says something that's sane for the first 50% of their statement, and then they drop something incredibly racist right after it, they're not someone you want to associate with.
No, definitely not. And he's the kind of guy that he plays into the stereotypes of conservatives. He's the one that makes conservatives, if you will. And I'm not going to really label, I mean, I guess I'd label him more of one of those than I would a liberal, but I don't like using that terminology for him. But he's the one that makes us actually look bad. And what scares me, like you were saying, I think there was sort of a power vacuum. Like once Charlie died, you know, they had Erica up there at his funeral, and I think she's going to do a pretty good job taking over. But there was sort of that vacuum of who's going to be the next big right wing leader, and he's sort of stepped up, but he's this weird alt far right, if you will, if I even want to use that term. And unfortunately, he's sort of, I don't think he's taken a ton, but some of these younger conservatives who are a little sketchy, if you will, have sort of started following this movement. But I think it's just dangerous because now he's not even really right wing anymore. He's kind of saying dismantle both sides and just bring the whole thing down and restart it from scratch, which is not good because I'll even admit it. Both sides have their flaws and both sides have failed in certain ways. But we know in an election, we're either going to have a Republican or a Democrat. And while both sides have their flaws and neither side is perfect, I'd rather have the side that agrees with more of my values, you know, and what I believe in, the Republican Party. So while they're not perfect, one of the two is going to win. I highly unlikely, unless someone like Michael Jordan ran, and we're going to see a third party candidate winning. So we might as well, you know, keep the party that's going to align up a lot more with my Christian and conservative values, which is the Republican Party, rather than trashing and bringing down both, which he seems to be doing, which I think is very dangerous for our movement and just for the country in general and young conservatives.
Yep. I definitely think we do need to bring accountability. I don't think either party's perfect. I couldn't have said some of this stuff when I was vice chairman of the state party, but we do need accountability. We do need to be running the right type of candidates. But if there's something that I hope happens, especially with our generation, we aren't the boomers that have been in office for the last gajillion years. We're sick of the government. We're sick of people participating in insider trading. We're sick of the government being on our back. We want our Second Amendment rights. We want free speech. We don't want the nuclear family destroyed. You and I have been blessed with good families, but a lot of people, they haven't. Divorce is a normal thing. Mm-hmm. The way I hear it talked about, it's like, holy crap. Why is this so normal? Why? We went from you had a rock solid family almost guaranteed, and it was abnormal if a couple got divorced. Now it's borderline celebrated. We're not quite at that point, but there are cases where it is. Mm-hmm. We want normalcy. We want the government off our backs. We want a good family structure. Men want to be masculine and not treated as if they're toxic. White people aren't usually racist, but we're told that we are. There's a lot of common sense things that us young men believe in. And I think when we start running for office, there's going to be a shift. Conservatism with a libertarian element to it, I think, will be very common within especially DC, I hope. And you can see Anna Paula Luna, representative from Florida, Tim Burchett, folks that are supporting legislation to get rid of insider trading. Our generation will be the generation to get rid of it.
Oh, definitely. We're seeing things like I think it's starting to get better. I think COVID definitely had a negative effect, but grocery prices, we can barely afford them, housing, cars, and finally, even people on both sides of the aisle who were like 22, 25 coming out of college, like, I just want a house. I just want to be able to have a car, even if I don't have a family, like pets or something, my own place to call my own, get out of my parents' attic, get out of my parents' basement. And people on both sides are finally like, okay, we've got these gazillionaire politicians on both sides of the aisle that are, have long forgotten us, the common man, have long forgotten the Constitution, we the people, and they're riding off, retiring at 85 years old, worth half a gazillion dollars, like you were saying. And I think both people, I'd say people on both sides, especially on the right side, are kind of fed up with that. And they're like, okay, we need change. So yeah, I definitely could see someone, from our generation getting elected, going to Washington and help moving that forward.
Which, especially with the younger generation, and I say this broadly, but I can't remember which representative it was. I think he's from Texas. But there's a representative from Texas, and there's was Representative Cortez, AOC. They were co-sponsored legislation. I think it was to prevent insider trading, if I'm correct, or Congress members from trading stocks, which is basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. I never saw that coming. AOC, from our perspective, which is usually the right perspective, but neither here nor there, she's usually one of the whacked up individuals down in Congress. As Senator Kennedy said, she's the reason we need directions on a shampoo bottle. But, okay, guess what? She's on the younger side of things. She's not that boomer generation that's been there for a million years. Do I agree with her? No. But she joined in on legislation to prevent members of Congress from trading stocks, along with not the most hardcore Republican, but definitely more conservative than she is. So that generation, along with us, we're sick of how the government operates. Even if, you and I are born-again Christians, even if they're not a born-again Christian, even if they're not super hardcore pro-life. I've interacted, it was a couple of years ago, with some of the Young Americans for Liberty folks at UMaine. They were much more libertarian than I am, but I could take a good chunk of my views and say, hey, we agree with about 50 to 75%. Take folks like that in DC. We'd agree with stock trading. We'd agree with a lot of economic policies. The Second Amendment will agree. Take even a difficult topic like abortion. I'm pro-life. But, hey, let's say the first trimester. If you want to get pro-life legislation passed, okay, we'll have it in the first trimester, the last two trimesters. No. There's a good chance a more libertarian type dude would go along with that. Mm-hmm. And, I think this was a conversation I had with them. I remember this specifically. CBD. More libertarians are usually more legalized the drugs. I think my focus would be, okay, if you want to talk about drug usage, let's look at CBD specifically. We have weed stores popping up literally everywhere here in the state of Maine. We don't need that. It's not good for our community. I know a lot of people use it, but my personal perspective, and I think it's a good perspective, would be if it needs to be used medically, have it prescribed and picked up via a pharmacy. I'm an epileptic, so I'd be foolish to be against CBD-based medication. It's becoming increasingly popular to use CBD medication for epilepsy. I support it. But it's a sad sign of our culture when there's a lot of, quite frankly, borderline, if not full, dependence on CBD to be able to go through day-to-day life. So
Definitely.
get rid of the weed stores. But even if you have an anxiety disorder and it helps you, I'm not necessarily against it. Have it prescribed. If it can have less adverse health effects than psychotropic medications, go ahead and do it. Why not? I'm not the type of person who says psychological issues don't exist. I think some of us Christians say they don't exist, that doesn't happen. It's just spiritual. For me, it is a spiritual thing. I need to lock in with my walk with God, but some folks are genuinely going to have psychological issues that result in anxiety disorders. If there is a CBD-based medication that can help, go ahead. But it's medically controlled, not on the streets sold constantly. All of that to say is there is a lot of areas where we may not agree fully, but when our generation gets to DC and gets to Augusta, whether you're a hardcore conservative, hardcore libertarian, or kind of a mix of both, for me, and I don't know about you, but I'd assume so, we're going to be able to work really well to get what fake Republicans have been claiming for years now.
Oh, definitely. I think when you bring that libertarian side, I know we actually have some college Republicans who lean more on the libertarian side of things.
Yep.
Like our vice chair comes at it from he's a self-proclaimed atheist, so he doesn't necessarily have the moral compass a traditional conservative might have on the pro-life issue and the LGBTQ issue, but so he sort of is more conservative libertarian where he's like, no government on my paycheck, no government on my guns, a little more loosey-goosey with the LGBTQ and abortion issue, but still we agree on like 85% of stuff. And I definitely think if the two parties could run people who were kind of a mix of both, I definitely think that would be very effective. Getting, like you said, Yale involved with like CRs and Turning Point,
Yep.
because you kind of get a fresh perspective because they do a really good job with, get the insider trading out of DC, get the government out of my paycheck, kind of like what conservatives want. I definitely think if you kind of could take big names from both parties and run them as Republicans, because that's a bigger name, we
Yep.
definitely could get some of the filth and garbage out of Washington. So it's very interesting that you bring that up because I know we do have a lot of college Republicans who definitely have good libertarian views. And like I said, I'm sort of a mix of both too on economics and stuff. As a finance major, I want low taxes. I don't want any, well, I mean, we need a little bit, but I don't want as little government intervention as possible, like in my paycheck, my tax systems, the regulations and companies and whatnot. So yeah, I definitely think it'd be good to have a mix of both sort of combining in this new conservative freedom movement, if you will, I guess. So yeah.
I mean, last I checked, we fought a war a couple 100 years ago over a tax, right?
Yeah, now we pay like super high taxes in the country, so
Do I think we should go to war? No, I'm not advocating for that. But at the same time, we're blessed to have a political system where we can elect people that at least claim they're going to lower our taxes. And the more and more I think about it, the argument is, well, there's benefits programs that might be hurt, or there's, public services. Yes, okay, naturally, our taxes are going to be higher than they were in 1776. That's just expected. We have public maintained roadways, we have ambulance services, we have a lot of things that are dependent on our taxes. But at the same time, if you have more money, and in high school, we actually have education on how to manage your finances, not gender theory classes. Whoops, did I add that? We could be much more set to have less dependence on the government and more money in our pockets. So imagine a society where we can't do this right now. We are fully dependent on Maine Care, Medicaid, stuff like that. So we can't get rid of those programs right now. But imagine a society where those programs were either much smaller than they are or didn't exist, but people could still afford health care. Chuck and I on the Muddy Waters last night talked about this. It used to be 50 years ago, 60 years ago, even more than that, we had doctor's offices that were local. They were in doctor's homes. You could go, have a doctor's appointment, and there wasn't any freaking out of, oh my gosh, can I afford this? The more insurance companies have gotten involved and the more the government has gotten involved, the more expensive healthcare has gotten. So, can we fight the insurance companies and also make it so that healthcare costs go down and make it so that you and I can afford our healthcare without having to be dependent on the government? It's something I've seen. Looking at the epilepsy medications I need, once I'm on my own insurance plan, if things don't change or if I don't get a job that pays more and I work 50 hours a week, I may be forced to be on Maine Care. And there's nothing wrong with being on Maine Care, but I don't want to have to be forced. I want that to be an option. I don't want to be forced to have to be on Maine Care. So no shade to Maine Care. That should be a choice. I shouldn't be forced to be dependent on the government. So lower the taxes, make it so we can have more money in our pockets, and then the more and more benefit programs we can cut if the cost of living goes down. It's dependent on that. The better, the less debt we're going to have, the less taxes we're going to have, and the richer the people are going to be. But it's also dependent on the side of things regarding cost of living. That has to go down. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think it can be done. People think it can't, but we've absolutely skyrocketed the deficit and made programs get bigger and bigger and bigger in the last 50 years. Reverse what we've done. People can have a cheaper cost of living. People will be able to afford health care. Won't have to be dependent on the government. And the government will be smaller. Okay. And there are some government programs I'd be fine with keeping. Social Security, that's one of them. I am fine with that. There's nothing wrong. I think it could have some reform, but I think that program should be kept. There are some borderline socialist programs that are fine. If we can find a way to keep a healthcare program that doesn't work as terribly as it does now, okay, maybe we could keep it. But a lot of the stuff we have, it could go if we actually had better economic policy here in the state, in the federal government.
Yeah, I definitely think we made some mistakes along the way. I think pushing for privatized healthcare, taking it away from nonprofits, I definitely think did a lot of damage because, a couple hundred years ago, you had nonprofits like Red Cross and churches running a lot of your healthcare systems. And obviously, in some ways, sometimes churches don't always have the money or means to get like top-notch medical equipment. Obviously when you had like nuns and priests running around, putting bandages on people, it's a lot easier nowadays, than doing like surgeries and stuff. But I definitely think trying to get a more nonprofit healthcare run system, which I'm sure we could go back to it. It would be hard getting rid of privatized healthcare. Yeah, holding insurance companies accountable. And I definitely think also pushing for better ways of lifestyle. For example, I know RFK has tried to do this with the FDA, like getting some of the junk out of our food. Like most countries in Europe and Asia don't even have half the chemicals we have in our food. They don't even allow certain products like Mountain Dew in certain Western European countries because you're basically drinking toxic like soap, putting it in your body, and then that drives up, your health issues, which drives up costs. So I think doing reform in our groceries and like food and drink market is one thing. I would say do things like reform for like social media and like electronics. Like I wouldn't be opposed to like age limits on like social media accounts, like 13 and older or 16 and older. That way kids can go outside and touch grass.
18 and older.
Yeah, even 18 and older. They can go outside,
Seriously.
learn to touch grass, learn to talk to people. They have less health problems, which means they're not in a doctor's office or in a therapy office, 50 times a week. So I think definitely pushing for economic reform, but also like the personal reform in food and social media, getting people out of mental health centers and hospitals for the garbage they're eating, would also bring costs down. So.
No, I agree 100%. That would be something I would support. Legislation to make it illegal for anyone below the age of 18 to be on social media. Doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
We're all on it. We're all addicted to it. But hey, at least make the addiction start later. Don't let it manipulate younger folks. I'm 21, and let's see, I've had social media since mid 2022. Never used much of any of it before. YouTube was the closest thing I did during those days, and I have noticed since then my attention span has plummeted. Buddy will show me a movie, and if my attention isn't grabbed like that, I could be asleep in about 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's thanks to the stupid Instagram reels constantly scrolling. If my attention isn't grabbed immediately, if I don't get that dopamine blast immediately, I'm not interested. And that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
I see some movies from, made 30, 40 years ago. Holy crap. Rolling the credits through the beginning, it's like, puts you to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas folks 30, 40 years ago, that was completely normal. We need to get rid of social media for people 18 and below.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I probably never would have said that a few years ago, but it's true.
Yeah, I think as I get older, I appreciate actually going outside and being in nature. And I'm kind of like, I think I would have saved a lot of anxiety and just time waste. Yeah, wasting time if I hadn't had access to it until I was, at least in high school. I mean,
Yep.
there's no need for a 14 or even 11-year-old to be on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or even video games for 8 hours a day at that age. Go outside, touch grass. I know I sound like I'm 70 years old, but I mean, there's good health benefits to it. And I think that'll be a huge thing that solves our healthcare crisis too, is like preventing these things from happening before. Preventive care usually costs a lot less than restoration care. So I think that's a big push too. And yeah, a couple years ago I probably would have been like, yeah, whatever, I'm on Instagram every day, do it whenever you want. But now that I'm older, like, yeah, I could see we should have some at least boundaries, if not getting rid of it, at least to have more boundaries in place, if you're not if not completely eliminating it for younger generations if possible.
No, I agree 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a big emphasis on purity too. I know folks who never had social media, and their parents maintained their devices. They technically weren't their devices; it was the parents' devices. And this sounds crazy, especially as a younger person myself. I hated it, being the more sheltered kid. But now the folks that were even more sheltered than me have the most pure minds. They were better set up for adult life.
Mm-hmm.
They are some of the most respectful and loving folks I know. And some people will say, well, if they're sheltered, they're not going to be socialized. Bullcrap. If your parents make an effort to have the said folks be socialized, they'll be socialized. They are some of the folks that have the best social skills that I know. So they've got the social skills. They're loving, they're patient, they're kind, they're confident, they're pure. I'm not seeing any issues here.
Yeah.
Aside from the issue is those of us who were addicted to it early, and I was addicted to it late by most standards. Get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely a good balance you can have, but sheltering your kids, keeping them away from that garbage. You can still get them out in the world. You can still expose them to certain things. That way, when they turn 18 and get off to college, they're like they've never seen someone with pink hair before. Their mind doesn't blow to a million. Their mind doesn't blow to a million pieces.
That's a liberal.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, you can shelter to an extent where you're like, okay, you don't really need to be on Instagram Reels watching, people eating Tide Pods at 8 years old. So yeah, there's definitely that balance. You want to expose them to some real world things, but at the same time, shelter them. Say, hey, go touch grass, keep your mind pure, get off your phone for a few hours. So there's definitely that balance, and I think people go, to extreme on either side. But yeah, there's that good balance we need to bring back to society.
No facts.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you also look at the pornography use rates.
Yeah.
I don't think social media has helped. Oh, I know.
No,
it has not
definitely
helped.
not.
You look at, I haven't verified it, but I watched the video and a guy said if I'm correct, my knowledge is the average user is starting around 11 or 12, or it's increasingly so. What? Holy mackerel. 11 or 12?
Yeah, definitely.
You know what? I'm actually going to look it up now. I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
What is the average age of to use? Okay, the CCO survey finds the average age at which children first see pornography is 13. Girls and boys are just as likely as one another to see. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I remember statistics like, I mean, even 20 years ago, it wasn't even up until you were like in late high school or even college that a lot of kids, and now you're being exposed to it in like upper elementary and middle school. And I know it used to be the statistics were that girls were a lot less likely to
Mm.
be exposed to that stuff, but now I think it's equal. Like I think girls struggle with it just as much as guys do, which is encouraging for guys, but
It's
at the
gotten
same
pretty close.
time discouraging, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, okay, you open up TikTok, you open up Instagram. What have you got? A bunch of soft porn, quite frankly. I've conditioned my Instagram feed and my TikTok feed, for the most part, to be brain rot and politics
Yeah.
because I'm a 21-year-old guy. I'm seeing stupid generated videos and politics. That's my life. But when I first got Instagram, when you open up the search page, it was disgusting. You open up TikTok, it's the same thing. So for young folks, 18 and below, never subject them to that softcore pornography. That's
Hmm.
what it is.
Yeah.
Let their brains develop normally. They've got 18 years of purity, a foundation, and then also a bigger thing, bring it away from social media. Society needs to come back to God.
Oh,
Have a
definitely.
God built foundation amongst society, along with legislation saying if you're 18 and below, you cannot use social media. We say 21, below 21, you can't drink. Why can't we at least say 18 and below, you can't use social media? Also, with a God based society, we will have a moral compass within this nation and we will be built on the rock. I don't think it's that crazy.
No, I think that would fix a lot of problems with social media, with pornography, with drug use,
Mm-hmm.
with greed, obviously, in like
Yep.
corporate America, in healthcare and markets and whatnot. I mean, I think it would fix a lot of our messes. I mean, scripture says that very clearly. You go away from God and society doesn't necessarily collapse immediately, but it goes to pieces really, really fast. And unfortunately, I think we're seeing that in America. I'm hopeful with younger generations. I think they're starting to get curious and starting to look for answers because I know a lot of young people are very empty and depressed, and the world seems to be collapsing. So I think we
Yep.
may start seeing younger people like, okay, I need some sort of answer. And when they see Christians who can actually go out there and say, hey, my heart's full, I found an answer to life's
Yep.
big question, they're like, okay, I want this. I'm tired of chasing pornography or prostitution or drugs or alcohol or social media or attention because those things only fill me temporarily. And I think that would be a huge fix. And and then also putting boundaries in place like the social media thing, so that way kids have that good foundation. Because
Yep.
yeah, like it's good to be in Sunday school every week, but if you're being bombarded by that stuff Monday through Saturday at that
Yep.
age, like if you get to be 18 and you decide I want to go watch that stuff, fine. You're at that point, you've had your childhood, you're an adult, whatever. But yeah, for 11-year-old little girls and little boys seeing that garbage, it's gonna maybe not ruin their future marriage, but it could be
Listen,
detrimental to their future
it's
relationships.
going
And
to, though.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
that God can't fix it,
yeah.
but what is going to be easier to resolve? Pornography addiction is never easy to resolve, but if you started at 18 or 11, you've got either a year, say if you started at 18 and want to fix it at 18, you've got roughly a year of rot for the Holy Spirit to clear out of your brain. If you started at 11, you've got 7 years of
Hmm.
rot. Not that the Holy Spirit can't do it, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for you.
Yeah.
So purity is crucial, being built on the rock. And society is going to be built with a moral compass. It just depends on which moral compass you choose. And for a long time, it was a biblical moral compass. With some of the original colonies, if not all of them, you had to have a declaration of faith to serve in public office. Wow, we've changed a lot.
Yeah.
Now we've got Somalia First representatives down in Augusta. Interesting. There's a lot.
Hmm.
There's a lot to be said there. And now we're at a point where 11-year-olds, 13-year-olds roughly are getting addicted to pornography. We have an atheistic society. We are vastly turning away from God. And we're, in some ways, turning towards Islam. So we went from Christianity to agnosticism, atheism, kind of a mix, to heading towards Islam. You look at England, the most popular name, depending on the statistic you read, for young boys is Mohammed.
Hmm.
Explain that to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't. I don't want to necessarily put blame on one specific issue, but I think when you have loose border things, and now I know I get a lot of hate. They're like, "Oh, you're a Christian, you shouldn't be." It's not that we don't want immigrants here, and it's not that I don't want to be compassionate and helping people who want a better life get in here. But when you have these loosey goosey things, you're gonna start seeing these effects. You're gonna start seeing people coming up. You're gonna start seeing Middle Eastern flags on your big streets. You're gonna start seeing pride flags everywhere. I mean, it's a you have to have uh, sovereignty. There's a place for Islam. Obviously, yeah, if you're going to be peaceful, you have religious freedom. You can have a mosque in the United States, but there's a reason why, like, you're Saudi Arabian and you want to be a Saudi Arabian nationalist, then you live in Saudi Arabia. You don't come through our border. You don't change our country. Like that's the whole point of having a country, like national sovereignty. There are different countries with different groups of people. It's not racist. It's not saying I don't want people to come here. Absolutely. I mean, we're founded on immigration. But yeah, you're definitely going to start seeing that. I think unfortunately England kind of let their borders go loosey goosey, which is surprising because they're an island in the middle of the sea. But they let swarms of people in. And if we start doing that here more like we did the past 4 years in America, we're going to start seeing a big decline. And I think that might be part of the decay. Not only our own people turning away from God, but also letting other people in who aren't all bad people. I don't want to, let me get that straight. But some people who are bad, rotting and decaying the morality in our society. So
Well, we need assimilation.
yeah,
President Trump made this comment. It was one of the presidential debates back for the 2016 election. He commented, "We speak English here in the U.S." There's nothing wrong with speaking another language, but you buy a product and on the packaging there's about 17 million languages. We are a different nation than we were 50 years ago. So if you want to have Spanish or French there, okay, whatever. But at the same time, it begs the question, where did assimilation go? Where did pride in American culture go? If someone speaks a different language, whatever. But they should also speak English. They should understand American history. They should be proud to be an American. If you serve in D.C. or Augusta, you shouldn't have dual citizenship. You shouldn't be referring to your home country as our country. Deca Delac has been got red-handed multiple times down in Augusta, putting Somalia first, whether it's in Augusta or on the news. But she's putting Somalia first rather than Maine. And she was elected by Maine people last I checked.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lack of American pride and representation in D.C. and Augusta. And it's, I would say less D.C., but it's still happening. It's starting to happen on the local level. That's where it's starting. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's happening in D.C. before long.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of surprised me as such a small out there state like Maine would be having that. But at the same time, obviously when you've got a government in place in our state that I don't think a majority of Mainers want, that allow these radical things to happen, then yeah, you're going to get that. And I asked the question in the nicest way possible. Like if your country was so good and you want to support them in our Congress, like why would you leave that country in the first place? Like why did you leave Somalia in the first place if it's so good? And why do you come here to America, get elected to office? Like what's her name? Is it I'm going to butcher it. Is it Elon Omar?
Ilhan Omar, yep.
Yeah. She comes over and complains about how horrible America is. But it's like, well, number one, you're an American representative. So you shouldn't. I mean, obviously, we're not perfect, but also, like, if your country was so good, like, why did you leave there in the first place?
Yep.
And why are you trying to bring the filth that you escaped from back over here? It's like people coming over from the USSR. They weren't trying to, they were like, no, don't vote for socialism. Don't vote for communism.
Yep.
We just escaped that. We don't want that anymore.
Exactly.
And now
if
young
you love
people.
it so much, stay over there.
Yeah, exactly. Young people are coming over and they're like, "Oh, I just escaped it, but I'm going to bring it right with me." It's like, no, that's not.
Do you mean Californians moving to Texas? Oh, did I say that?
Yeah, exactly. And then they're like, "You're going to keep voting blue." It's like, oh, okay, well, it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's just bad. It's a mess.
Yep.
So yeah, it's crazy.
Well, it's been absolutely fantastic to talk with you. I look forward to doing it again sometime if you'd like.
Oh,
Try
absolutely.
to bring on some folks like Peyton and some other folks. We need to make sure that us young conservatives are stepping up and making sure there's a massive Republican victory in 2026. So thank you so much, Roman. And where can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. So my Instagram is Roman_C297. You can go follow my friend Molly and I's podcast. It's the Right Wave podcast on Spotify, or you can find me on Facebook at Roman Cassidy. Those would be my three big things right there. If you want to come follow me, check me out. So yeah, thank you again for having me.
Fantastic.